Hello, salam, and welcome to What the Patriarchy, where we are working to dismantle the patriarchy one Islamic feminist issue at a time. This is Dr. Shahnaz Aqani. Today, we continue our summary of Dr. Kecia Ali's book, Sexual Ethics and Islam. This is the book. One of my favorites, one of the most important books that I have ever read in my entire life. We are now on chapter 6, which is titled Reduce But Do Not Destroy Female Circumcision, and the word circumcision is in quotes, in Islamic sources. And I like how it says Islamic sources and not Islam. If you have to assign just one chapter from this book to a Muslim audience to complicate the idea of Islam to them, or if you have to read one text that complicates the idea of Islam for you, I think this is a chapter. It does an excellent job challenging any popular Muslim assumptions and expectations of what it means to say that something is Islamic or un-Islamic. An important note here before I continue, Ali doesn't use the word genital mutilation in this chapter or circumcision, female circumcision. She just uses the word genital cutting, and that's a statement. Okay, so my favorite thing, some fun facts. Did you know that according to the Reliance of the Traveler, which is a classical Shafi'i legal manual, circumcision is obligatory on both men and women? Yeah, for women, it involves reducing or cutting the clitoris, which for those who have it, I hope you know that it can take you places you have never imagined before. The patriarchy really hates women and everything about women and our bodies, doesn't it? Like, including one of the most important and essential organs of our bodies. Like the most important source of pleasure, the most important site of pleasure that so many of us have. But another fun fact, did you know that male circumcision is not considered obligatory or fardh in all of Islam, in all of the fiqh, in all of the legal schools? The same folks, or most of the same folks who require it for men also require it for women, and others considered a sunnah, a noble act for both, and other Sunni schools actually considered at least a sunnah, a highly commendable thing for women to be circumcised. And my personal favorite, for the Hanafis, it is a courtesy to the husband. What even? And a side note, because, of course, in my native language, which is Pashto, the word for circumcision is sunat, which is also the word for sunnah, things that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did and that he encouraged us to do as well. But yet, sunnat or male circumcision is treated as a mandatory thing, not a sunnah, not sunnat, as by Muslims all over the world. So that's not just my people. And also, I have to ask, was the Prophet even circumcised? And no, this question is not addressed in the book, but it's just a huge question mark for me because it raises questions about what the sunnah even means. What makes something a sunnah? There are articles out there on whether the Prophet was circumcised or not. So, in case it's not already clear, this chapter deals with the question of female circumcision or female genital cutting, how it's viewed in the historical classical texts, and how contemporary Muslims approach this issue, how they think about it, including activists and scholars in parts of the world where it is practiced. An important point here that the majority of Muslims don't practice female genital cutting, and wherever it is common, it's performed by all the religious communities there, not just the Muslims. One exception, though, is Southeast Asia, where female genital cutting was completely unheard of before Islam, but with the coming of Islam there, it is practiced only by the Muslims. And that's because the legal school that's dominant in Southeast Asia is the Shafi'i school, and that's where it is considered a fardh, obligatory for women, for both women and men to be circumcised. The chapter discusses how activists approach this issue versus how jurists have historically approached it. Some scholars still support and insist on it, and others don't. There are different ways that it is to be performed for those who do support it. There's disagreement on how much of the clitoris is to be removed. Some want the whole thing removed. Some want it barely scraped because it's all symbolic anyway. And some go as far as to want not just the clit, but also the labia minora and the labia majora to be at least partially removed, and to have the vaginal opening sewn up with just a tiny opening left for something like urine and menstrual blood to come out. Don't do this. This is very dangerous for women's health. So talk about the meaning of the word Islamic, since some of the legal schools that so many Muslims consider the ultimate source of Islam and take a tad more seriously than they should, in my opinion, require that females be circumcised, that women, girls be circumcised. Does this mean that female circumcision or genital cutting is an Islamic thing? It's not in the Qur'an, not for male circumcision and not for female circumcision, but it is in a questionable hadith, even though the Prophet Muhammad never circumcised any of his daughters, not before Islam and not after. So can we say then, or is it totally honest to claim that Islam prohibits female genital cutting like some Muslims insist? Again, as one of the recurring points of every chapter in this book highlights, your answer depends on what the word Islam even means. What we should do perhaps is to acknowledge that the classical texts do require or recommend something like female circumcision, female genital cutting, but we can critique them for doing so. Or we might say that it's un-Islamic because it's not found in the Qur'an. The author is critical, however, of using only the Qur'an as a source of Islam. But her point here is that some Muslim scholars claim that Islam does not allow female genital cutting, but they're actually not telling the complete truth unless they tell us what they mean by Islam. And instead, what they do is to declare their own interpretations as more Islamically authentic than the side arguing in support of female genital cutting or the entire historical Islamic tradition. But the reality is that the Qur'an doesn't speak of male circumcision either. There are hadiths, questionable and probably incorrect, and not found in Bukhari or Muslim, that do endorse female genital cutting. That's where the whole reduce but don't destroy phrase in the title of this chapter comes from. Abu Dawud himself, the collector of one of the hadiths on female genital cutting, criticizes the hadith and declares it weak himself. The author, Kecia Ali, notes that a more holistic approach to thinking and talking about female genital cutting is to argue, and I quote, for the sanctity of the body from a spiritual rather than a medical perspective. And that quote is on page 133 of this 2016 edition. So consider, for example, this question. How could the jurists allow female circumcision or any circumcision while simultaneously saying that changing God's creation was not permissible? I mean, these dudes completely prohibited something like plucking the eyebrows for women and getting tattoos for everyone, claiming that this is changing God's creation. But then in the same breath, they required circumcision for boys and girls. The issue with the spiritual approach, though, as the author also notes, is that it would apply to male circumcision as well because, again, the Qur'an doesn't talk about male circumcision at all. So then, for those who do want or support male circumcision but not female, the author suggests that a case against female genital cutting can be made by referencing the severity of the consequences for female genital cutting compared to male circumcision. We're talking about medical complications like infection, pain, a diminished sexual response, and secondary fertility. The author then provides a detailed critical discussion of the hadiths on female genital cutting. We have stuff like reduce but don't destroy, circumcision being a sunnah for women and fardh or obligatory for men, and ablutions or ghusl being necessary for when the two circumcised parts meet of the spouses or the sex partners, meaning after sex. The author then critiques translations of the language in these hadiths and misleading summaries and translations of female circumcision debates and passages from the historical texts when they're translated into contemporary English. In the conclusion of the chapter, the author offers some very helpful suggestions for activists and others who do not support female genital cutting because they find it to be ethically unacceptable. I'm not going to get into the details here, but it is a very helpful discussion. In the coda, we also read about how American Western attitudes towards female genital cutting are informed by what I think are pseudo-liberal claims of bodily autonomy that we allow some people, but deny to others. The author points out that since the publication of this book, genital surgery has risen dramatically among white American women. The coda also challenges us to rethink the way that we talk about and think about female genital cutting, including how we talk about it as a Middle Eastern or an African problem, not an Islamic one. In such conversations, we tend to characterize those who do partake in female genital cutting basically as barbaric people who don't understand Islam and who aren't practicing Islam correctly. She challenges the dichotomy of Islam versus Muslims, where Muslims are the bad guys and Islam is the good guy, but followed by the bad guys. You should not be doing that. Again, this chapter, like all of the others, is concerned with larger questions such as those of religious authority, legitimacy, authenticity, questions of who determines whether a certain practice or interpretation or action is Islamic or not, what Islam is even, what are the sources of Islam, is it determined by God in the Qur'an or by the Prophet in Hadiths, the companions of the Prophet, the classically trained scholars of Islam who gave us fiqh and sharia, or simply Muslims themselves and what they do? If the latter, what do we do with the huge diversity that we have with Muslims and their practice of Islam, and what each group and community of Muslims consider or find acceptable and unacceptable? And the fact that for too many things, our ideas of what's acceptable and not have changed over time. I'll stop there. You should totally go and read the chapter. It's one of my favorites, and I think it offers a lot of food for thought. Next up is chapter 7 on female bodies and male agency in the Qur'an. Salam.